Hi everybody! I hope you're all enjoying the summertime, and since it's summertime, and you can see that I'm on the couch, you know what that means. It's time for more shitty couch vlogs. So anyway, today's shitty couch vlog, you might have already read the title, so let's not beat around the bush. This is going to be my top 5 and bottom 5 fonts or typefaces. So why am I making a video about fonts? Am I finally running out of things to make lists out of? But in all seriousness, fonts are something that we all are pretty familiar with. We've had to wrestle with them from time to time if you're typing a term paper or making a YouTube video. And the weird thing is that people get surprisingly opinionated about fonts. I mean, it's the internet. What is there anything that people don't get opinionated about? So that's something I want to stress right here at the beginning, that these are just my preferences. These are just how I feel about these specific fonts, and if a font that I dislike is a font that you like, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. As the old cliche goes, different strokes for different folks. Hey, that's not Happy Days though. But all I'm saying is that this is just a video where I'm talking about fonts, what I think is fun about them, what I think is not so fun about them, which ones I like using, which ones I really don't like using. But really this is all just for comedy purposes. But if you want, you can leave in the comments what you think is your favorite and what you think is your least favorite font, for instance. I'd find that very interesting to read for myself. And maybe if I get enough comments, I'll make a follow-up video to this. I mean, it's been known to happen. But anyway, because I want to leave this video off on a positive note, usually when I do these top 5, bottom 5 videos together, I tend to start with the top 5 picks and end with the bottom 5s, but I want to end on a positive note. So instead, this time we're going to flip it around. I'm going to do each bottom 5 entry first, followed by the top 5 entry then. So that's just in case you don't get confused, which I probably will when I'm editing this, so if you spot the error in the numbering or something like that, you know, I'm sure at least 2 of you will point it out in the comments. So let's get on with it. The number 5 on my bottom 5 is all the dings. You know what I'm talking about. Wingdings, Wingdings 2, Wingdings 3, the electric boogaloo. That joke doesn't work because I said it on 3 instead of 2. Webdings. I mean, let's face it, their utility as fonts is pretty limited. Because, yes, it's kind of fun that you can just create symbols in documents without having to steal stuff from Google image search. You've all done it, I know you. Don't you dare lie to me. But the inherent problem with the whole dings format is that you really have to know which keys to press to find which symbols. Like, for instance, if I just want a regular heart symbol or just like a skull and crossbones, like, Wingdings is perfectly fine for that. If I need a yin-yang symbol for some reason, or a Star of David, oigewalt. But the problem is, like, unless you memorize what each of the different keys do, it's not really that useful. After a while, it really just becomes faster to just go into a Google image search and just find an image of a Star of David. And really, unless you have a symbols app, there's really no fast way to find those symbols on Wingdings, and I probably blew the minds of at least 5 people by telling you that a symbols app is something that exists. But I use Wingdings very rarely anyway. This is really just a kind of a non-issue. That's why they're at number 5. It's not really much of a hassle, so I decided that they should go to the lower half of the list. Alright, the number 5 on my top 5, and you've already seen it if you're watching this video, or any of my past videos. You probably all know that I have a long-term relationship with this particular font, which I seem to use in practically every video. Not in the title, then at least in the HM Productions title card at the end. Yes, it's Impact! Now here's the thing I like about Impact, is that it's a very concise, tight font, but it's also robust. I just like the fact how thick those letters are. No. That thick with a K. Thank you. When I was starting out YouTube back in 2006, yes, 2006, I tended to go with just whatever font Movie Maker would suggest for me. But over time, I started to notice that those little texts at the bottom were just kind of hard to read. So all the really big, shiny fonts that I could stick in there would always kind of just look ugly. So that's where I discovered my love for Impact, because it kept the text very tight, but the letters were still thick enough that you could actually read it. And now, yes, I use it pretty much in all of my YouTube videos. But I will admit, its usage is kind of limited a little bit because, well, let's just face it, you wouldn't want to read a full page of text in Impact. I mean, I'm not crazy. So just like the dings, it's kind of a limited utility font, so that's why it's only at number 5. Number 4 on the bottom 5, and I know I'm gonna take some shit for this, is Exocet. Or if you will, it's that font you see in the Diablo games. Well, I'm gonna be honest here, I don't flat out hate Exocet, but I just don't like the design philosophy behind it. Now here's the thing, I do like letters that roughly take up the same amount of space in most fonts. They're usually kind of nice to read, it makes it much cleaner when you try to align all the text properly, but I don't like fonts that are the same height and width. And here's the thing, Exocet is a product of the 90s, and it is the most 90s font that I can think of. And here's the thing, I usually like things from the 90s, but honestly, even though I love the movie Demolition Man, I seriously do cringe a little bit every time I see this museum scene. Because, yeah, that's kind of what it feels like. That's the font of this particular era. And you can always tell that when it's like a CD cover or a movie poster from the mid-90s, that they didn't want to put any thought into it, they just picked the first kind of edgy looking font that they could find. They always pick Exocet. But like I said, it's not a font I absolutely hate, but it's something that I can always just pinpoint as, yep, that came from the 90s. And number 4 on my top 5 is Fixed Sys, or Fixed System. I honestly don't know what it's called. Now, unfortunately, all the examples of fixes are going to probably have a white border around them because, unfortunately, my editing software does not support it. But let me just put it this way. I just love fixes. I always have. This font really just yells computer for me. It's the kind of font that back in the day when I used to draw stuff on Paint, if I ever wanted to give it that kind of retro gamey feel, I would always use fixes. But on top of that, it's actually really nice to read. I used to even write scripts in Notepad using fixes, and you can understand, I was a little disappointed when it got removed from Notepad as the default font. In fact, I was a little surprised to find out that this font is still surprisingly popular in the coder community because it's so easy to read. Yes, this was the default font in the very first Windows ever. It's a nice looking font. I sometimes use it in my title cards, as you might have noticed, but again, kind of a limited utility font, and a lot of different applications don't even support it anymore. But I like it, it's nice. Number 3 on the bottom 5, it's Comic Sans. There's probably not a single font on the internet that people have more heated opinions about than Comic Sans, and I can kind of understand why. Comic Sans is a font that is supposed to emulate the speech bubble fonts of comic books. Kind of wild and fancy-free and playful, but the problem is that it's a very, very disappointingly formulaic font, because obviously it is. You start writing any words that have more than one of the same letter, and even worse, more than one of the same letter back to back, and you really start to kind of get sick and tired of it after a while. Now, I don't have the same kind of deep-rooted hatred for this font. I think some people go a little over the top when it comes to saying just how much they hate Comic Sans. The main problem with Comic Sans is that it does kind of feel a little phony. It's trying to be nice and happy and playful, and it just doesn't quite look the part. And number 3 on my top 5 is Comic Sans! Okay, like I said, Comic Sans is not a great font. It's not necessarily even a very good font, but I will say, when used appropriately with certain types of words, it does serve the purpose. I mean, it's a font that looks a hella goofy. That's what it was designed to be. Now, if you dislike it because a lot of the letters just look the same, Comic Sans is not necessarily the kind of font that you can write a full sentence with. So in that, it's another kind of low utility font, unfortunately. But the little utility that it does have, I think it personally fulfills very well. It does give off a kind of a goofy vibe. You've probably seen me use this font in a lot of my Bottom-5 videos, because it honestly just kind of fits the bill. It looks silly. But again, I do stress that I would never ever use Comic Sans to write more than maybe a full sentence, but even then I would rather limit it to just a title of a video, for instance. So it's not a good font, but it is a font that has its uses, which is why it's on both lists. Alright, and number 2 on my bottom 5, and again, I know I'm probably going to take some shit for this, is pretty much the entire Arial family. I just do not like the Arial fonts, and I'm honestly at a loss to even try to explain why that is. I just don't like the look of them. Somehow the letters, they're just a little too sleek. Arial thin is a little too thin. Arial black is a little too thick. Haha, thought I'd trip up there, didn't ya? I don't know, the thing that comes to mind with Arial is probably one of the words that I overused in one of my previous couch vlogs the most. It's a really bland line of fonts. I don't like the look of them at all. But here's the thing, if somebody has written an entire paper in Arial and it's something that I have to absolutely read, I can power my way through it, which is the only reason why it's not number one. It's still legible, that's not its problem. It's not a horribly counterintuitive font as a whole. I just don't like the look of it. I think some of the letters are just too skinny. It just has no character whatsoever. So yeah, that's probably more the reason why I don't like it. And number two is a recent addition to my favorite fonts, which is Calibri. You probably all know Calibri as that standard font in every freaking Windows application. And here's the thing, that spot used to be held by Times New Roman, and I honestly got my jimmies in a bit of a jam when I realized that Calibri was the new standard. I honestly at first didn't like it at all, but eventually I was kind of browbeat into using it because just switching fonts to Times New Roman every time was starting to get a little tiresome. But then over time that exposure to Calibri actually made me kind of like it. In fact, nowadays, I sometimes use it as the standard font when I write video scripts. I think Calibri's letters are nice and a little bouncy. They're not quite so skinny and faceless as the Arial fonts. So yeah, there's not a whole lot to it. I just think it's a very nice font. And the number one spot on my bottom five collectively goes to every single cursive font you can think of. I just do not like cursive. Now don't get me wrong, if you want to be fancy and everything, you can make a logo destroying in cursive overall, but fonts that try to emulate cursive, number one, never look like genuine cursive, and number two, just look bad. And number three, at their worst, they can be completely illegible. Now yes, this seems very hypocritical because I've been known to use some of these fancy looking cursive fonts every once in a while, but usually I use them for like a single word where you can at least tell what all the letters are. The most insulting use of these cursive fonts is when people use them for things like invitations or something like that. Because they suffer from the exact same problem as Comic Sans, is that when you're using words with multiples of the same letter, you notice just how similar all those letters are, which is not what they would look like if it was written in actual cursive. If you're actually going to go through the trouble of sending invitations and you want them to be in cursive so badly, then just make one note in cursive, scan it, and then copy that, because then at least it's a genuine cursive font that's being used. I seriously just can't stand them. I hate cursive fonts. Using cursive should just be illegal. That's just my opinion. And number one on my top five, my original love, which is Times New Roman! Seriously, I'm a little disappointed to find out that Times New Roman nowadays is apparently one of the most hated fonts. Which is like, really? Because I like Times New Roman so much. It reminds me of a time when newspapers were a thing. I mean, I think Times New Roman actually succeeds in what a lot of those cursive fonts just completely fail at. The cursive fonts are trying to kind of imbue the message with a kind of style and grace, and it ends up looking terrible, whereas Times New Roman is elegant, but moreover, it's legible, and it has a gravitas to it. You feel like stuff written in Times New Roman is important. That's why I liked it so much when it used to be the default font in like Word and such. Now my usage in it in videos is kind of limited, but most of my scripts are still written with Times New Roman as the font because I just like the look of it. I like the loopy old school G, I like the serifs on the T's, I just love everything about it. It is hands down my favorite font. And that's both of the lists. Now I invite you to leave your favorite fonts and least favorite fonts in the comments down below. I'm TheHande and see you on the next one. Bye-bye.